December 18, 1944. Stuurmant, Belgium. Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper commands Kampfgruppe Peiper, 5,800 Waffen-SS troops, 72 tanks, 120 vehicles, spearheading Germany's largest offensive since 1940. His armored column advances 40 kilometers inside American lines in 48 hours, cutting supply routes and spreading panic. Then his panzer crews report fuel gauges dropping below 1/4. Supply trucks carrying 500,000 liters of gasoline for Peiper's advance are stuck 30 kilometers behind the front, blocked by destroyed bridges, traffic jams, and American resistance. By December 19th, Peiper's King Tigers and Panther tanks sit immobile outside Stuurmant. His troops fight on foot while American reinforcements encircle the position. On December 24th, 6 days after breakthrough, Peiper abandons all vehicles and retreats on foot through American lines. He leaves behind 72 tanks, 120 half-tracks and trucks, and 400 dead soldiers. Not from American firepower primarily, but from empty fuel tanks. The Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last major offensive, launches with 200,000 German troops, 500 tanks, and 1,900 artillery pieces attacking through Ardennes forest December 16, 1944. The objective: break through thinly held American lines, capture Antwerp port 160 kilometers distant, split Allied armies, and force negotiated peace. Hitler personally plans the offensive, believing surprise attack through difficult terrain will succeed as it did in May 1940. But 1944. Germany differs catastrophically from 1940. Germany in one critical resource: fuel. German fuel production in December 1944 totals 30,000 tons monthly, down from 180,000 tons in May 1944, due to Allied bombing of synthetic fuel plants. Wehrmacht logistics allocate 5 million liters of fuel for initial Ardennes offensive, enough for 200 kilometers of advance if conditions are perfect. Peiper's Kampfgruppe receives fuel allocation for 100 kilometers, half the distance to Antwerp. German planning assumes captured American fuel depots will supply remaining advance. This assumption proves fatally optimistic. The first 72 hours of Bulge offensive demonstrate how modern mechanized warfare depends absolutely on fuel logistics, and how even successful tactical breakthrough collapses without gasoline. September-December 1944. Allied bombing campaign systematically destroys German synthetic fuel production. Operation Point Blank targets 14 major hydrogenation plants producing aviation fuel and vehicle gasoline from coal. By December, German fuel production drops 85% from May levels. Wehrmacht fuel reserves total 45,000 tons, enough for one major offensive or 2 months of defensive operations. Adolf Hitler, 55 years old and increasingly detached from military reality, orders preparation of Ardennes counteroffensive despite objections from field commanders about fuel shortages. Hitler believes bold offensive will shatter Allied coalition, buy time for secret weapons, V-2 rockets and jet aircraft, to change war's trajectory, and possibly force Western allies to negotiate separate peace. He names the operation Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, implying defensive operation to deceive Allied intelligence. German planning for Ardennes offensive acknowledges fuel limitations, but assumes capture of American supplies will solve the problem. Sixth Panzer Army commander SS-Obersturmbannführer Joseph Sepp Dietrich, 52 years old, veteran of Eastern Front armor operations, receives allocation of 2.5 million liters for his entire army, approximately 100 kilometers worth of fuel for 500 tanks. Dietrich objects to Hitler that fuel shortage makes reaching Antwerp impossible. Hitler dismisses concerns. The enemy has fuel depots everywhere. Capture them. Fifth Panzer Army under General der Panzertruppe Hasso von Manteuffel, 47 years old, professional officer respected for tactical skill, similarly protests inadequate fuel allocations. Hitler's response: drive fast, seize American fuel dumps, continue to Antwerp. The planning assumes three conditions must align perfectly: rapid breakthrough creating fuel capture opportunities, minimal American resistance allowing fast advance, and clear weather grounding Allied aircraft. None of these conditions materialize as expected. Wehrmacht logistics officers prepare elaborate fuel distribution plan demonstrating desperation behind offensive. German Army High Command designates Kampfgruppe Peiper as Sixth Panzer Army spearhead due to commander's aggressive reputation and unit's heavy tank composition including new King Tiger tanks. Peiper receives priority fuel allocation, enough for 90-kilometer advance. His route follows narrow forest roads to Huy, crossing Meuse River, then northwest to Antwerp. But what the Germans don't know yet makes this fuel shortage even more devastating. American First Army operates 3.5 million liters of fuel stored in depots throughout Belgium, exactly the captured supply German planning requires. However, these depots are located in towns the German spearheads never reach, protected by American units that resist more effectively than German intelligence predicts, and in many cases already evacuated or destroyed by withdrawing Americans who understand their strategic value. German fuel trucks and supply columns prepared for Bulge offensive reveal logistical nightmare. Standard German Panzer Division requires 300 cubic meters, 300,000 liters, of fuel daily for sustained offensive operations. Sixth Panzer Army fields 4 panzer divisions requiring 1.2 million liters daily. German logistics allocate 5 million liters total for first 5 days, barely sufficient for initial breakthrough, completely inadequate for sustained advance to Antwerp 160 kilometers distant. Supply columns use horse-drawn wagons and trucks captured from 6 different nations: German, French, Belgian, Russian, American, British, with incompatible parts and varying fuel consumption. Road networks through Ardennes forest consist of narrow routes inadequate for heavy traffic, easily blocked by destroyed bridges or disabled vehicles. The offensive's success depends on captured fuel reaching spearhead units within 24 hours of breakthrough. This never happens. December 16th, 1944. 0530 hours. 2,000 German artillery pieces open fire along 130-kilometer Ardennes front from Monschau to Echternach. The barrage lasts 90 minutes. Expenditure of ammunition stockpiled for months. At 0700 hours, 3 German armies attack: Sixth Panzer Army in north targeting Liege, Fifth Panzer Army in center toward Namur, 7th Army in south providing flank protection. Kampfgruppe Peiper leads 6th Panzer Army advance with 72 tanks including 30 Panthers, 20 Panzer IVs, and 22 King Tigers. Peiper, 29 years old, decorated Waffen-SS officer with reputation for aggressive tactics and ruthless determination, believes rapid advance is essential. Every hour of delay allows American reinforcements to arrive. His orders: drive fast, don't stop for anything, reach the Meuse in 24 hours. His fuel supply: 40,000 liters in tank fuel tanks, 30,000 liters in supply trucks, enough for approximately 80 kilometers in ideal conditions. First 12 hours reveal 3 critical problems undermining German planning. Roads are worse than maps indicate, American resistance is stronger than intelligence predicted, and fuel consumption exceeds estimates. Peiper's column encounters destroyed bridge over railway line at Losheim. First obstacle 10 kilometers into advance. Engineers require 2 hours to construct bypass. Traffic jam develops as following units converge on single route. Fuel consumption during stationary idling, 40 liters per hour per tank. By 1400 hours, 7 hours into offensive, Peiper's tanks consume 8,000 liters while advancing only 15 kilometers. His column captures Honsfeld at 1,600 hours, finding American supply depot. Troops discover warehouses containing food, ammunition, medical supplies. But minimal fuel. Americans evacuated gasoline stocks 2 hours earlier. Peiper's fuel situation, 52,000 liters remaining, 75 kilometers to Meuse River. The mathematics indicate he'll run dry before reaching primary objective. December 17th. 0300 hours. Peiper's column reaches Bullingen, capturing American airfield. Luftwaffe intelligence reports the facility stores 200,000 liters of aviation fuel, high-octane gasoline suitable for German tanks. Peiper orders immediate refueling. But American engineers sabotaged fuel pumps during evacuation. Fuel drains from underground tanks too slowly for rapid refueling. Peiper waits 4 hours while crews hand pump 50,000 liters. Dawn arrives. American aircraft appear overhead despite weather forecasts predicting cloud cover. Peiper orders column to continue. Staying exposes force to air attack. His tanks now carry near maximum fuel, approximately 85 kilometers worth. But they're already 50 kilometers from starting positions with 110 kilometers remaining to Meuse. The captured fuel briefly solves immediate crisis, but cannot sustain advance to Antwerp. Meanwhile, German supply trucks assigned to Peiper remain stuck 20 kilometers behind, mired in traffic jams, blocked by destroyed bridges, and delayed by American holdouts. At this exact moment, 30 kilometers south, Fifth Panzer Army commander Hasso von Manteuffel experiences similar fuel problems. His 2nd Panzer Division advances 30 kilometers toward Bastogne before encountering American resistance at Clervaux. The division's fuel status, 60% remaining after 1 day of combat operations. Manteuffel's advance depends on capturing Bastogne, critical road junction controlling 7 highways essential for supply columns. But American 101st Airborne Division reaches Bastogne first, December 18th evening, establishing defense that prevents German capture. Without Bastogne's road network, German supply trucks detour onto secondary roads, adding 50 kilometers to supply routes. This extra distance consumes fuel supplies intended for frontline armor. By December 19th, Manteuffel's panzer divisions operate at 40% fuel capacity, enough for limited tactical maneuvers, but insufficient for strategic breakthrough. December 17th evening. Peiper's Kampfgruppe approaches Stavelot. His column captures the town after brief fight, seizing bridge over Amblève River intact. American engineers attempt to demolish bridge, but explosives fail, lucky break for Germans. Peiper's tanks cross river and advance toward Troisponce, where 3 rivers converge, requiring multiple bridges. But his fuel gauges show critical levels, 30% remaining. He dispatches radio message to 6th Panzer Army headquarters, require immediate fuel delivery. Cannot continue without resupply. Response: supply columns delayed by traffic congestion. Continue advance. Capture American fuel. This exchange reveals fatal flaw in German planning. Offensive assumes captured fuel will arrive exactly when needed. But reality of combat delays, traffic jams, and American resistance prevents timely supply. Peiper continues advancing on fumes, gambling that next town contains American fuel depot. December 18th. 0700 hours. Peiper reaches Troisponce, finding all 3 bridges destroyed by American engineers. Excellent timing and execution of demolitions. His column must detour north toward Stoumont, seeking alternate route. Fuel situation: 20% remaining in most tanks, several vehicles already immobile from empty tanks. Peiper orders all non-combat vehicles abandoned and fuel consolidated into fighting vehicles. This extends range marginally, but reduces his column's combat power, fewer infantry carriers and support weapons. He advances towards Stoumont knowing each kilometre brings him closer to complete immobilization. At 1,100 hours, advance guard reports American fuel depot outside Stoumont, warehouse containing 60,000 litres. Peiper orders maximum speed assault to capture depot before Americans can evacuate or destroy it. What happens in the next 6 hours determines whether Peiper's spearhead can continue or become stranded deep inside American lines. December 18th, 1400 hours. Peiper's tanks assault Stoumont against American 30th Infantry Division defenders. The Germans capture town's outskirts, but American engineers torch the fuel depot before retreating. Flames consume 60,000 litres Peiper desperately needs. His fuel situation becomes catastrophic. Average tank carries 15% capacity, enough for 15 to 20 kilometers. His position, 45 kilometers inside American lines, 70 kilometers from Meuse River, 115 kilometers from Antwerp. The offensive's entire strategic objective, reaching Antwerp to split Allied armies, requires 115 additional kilometers of advance. Peiper's available fuel enables 20 kilometers maximum.
Simple arithmétique preuve continuation impossible.
But Peiper lacks authority to withdraw. Standing orders from Hitler prohibit retreat regardless of tactical situation. December 18th to 19th. Peiper's Kampfgruppe reaches maximum penetration, the high watermark of Bulge offensive. His tanks occupy Stoumont and nearby Gleize, forming defensive perimeter. American forces surround the German position, 82nd Airborne Division from north, 30th Infantry Division from west and south. Peiper receives radio message from Sixth Panzer Army, supply columns approaching your position. Maintain offensive pressure. But supply trucks never arrive, blocked by American counterattacks that recapture Stavelot, cutting Peiper's supply line. His Kampfgruppe is isolated 45 kilometers inside enemy territory with no fuel, dwindling ammunition, and increasing casualties. German propaganda radio broadcasts announce Kampfgruppe Peiper advances toward Meuse, pure fiction. Reality: Peiper's 72 tanks sit immobile around Gleize waiting for fuel that will never come. The spearhead of Hitler's grand offensive, designed to reach Antwerp in 7 days, is stuck permanently after 72 hours due to empty gas tanks. December 19th to 22nd. Peiper defends Gleize perimeter against increasing American pressure. His situation deteriorates daily. No fuel for maneuver, ammunition rationed to 10 rounds per tank gun, food supplies exhausted, medical supplies depleted, no possibility of evacuation. Weather clears December 23rd, allowing American aircraft to attack his position. P-47 fighter bombers destroy immobilized German armor with impunity. Peiper sends final radio message to headquarters December 23rd. Request permission to break out on foot. All vehicles lost. Impossible to hold position. Sixth Panzer Army Commander Dietrich reluctantly authorizes withdrawal. December 24th, 0300 hours, Peiper leads 800 survivors, remnant of original 5,800-man Kampfgruppe, through forest trails back toward German lines. They abandoned 72 tanks, 120 half-tracks and vehicles, and all heavy weapons. American forces occupy Gleize December 26th, finding intact German equipment, out of fuel, but mechanically functional. Peiper's 72-hour offensive achieves 45-kilometer penetration before fuel exhaustion ends the advance permanently. December 20th to 23rd. 1944. Across entire Bulge offensive front, identical fuel crises paralyze German spearheads. 2nd Panzer Division, Manteufel's deepest penetration unit, reaches Zellers, 8 kilometers from Dinant on Meuse River, December 24. The division's tanks exhaust fuel supplies within sight of strategic objective. American 2nd Armored Division counterattacks December 26, destroying 88 German tanks immobilized for lack of gasoline. Tank crews fight from stationary positions until overwhelmed. Not a single German tank crosses the Meuse River, the minimum objective for offensive success. Panzer Lehr Division captures Rochefort December 23, but cannot advance further without fuel. 116th Panzer Division approaches Hotten before fuel exhaustion halts movement. Every German armored spearhead reaches maximum advance determined not by enemy resistance, but by fuel gauge reaching empty. Three factors now converge to transform fuel shortage into total strategic failure. Captured American fuel depots prove unreachable or already destroyed. German supply columns cannot reach spearhead units due to traffic congestion and American counterattacks, and whether clearing December 23 enables Allied air power to interdict remaining supply routes. First factor: fuel capture operations fail completely. German intelligence identifies 15 American fuel depots with an offensive zone containing 4 million liters. German forces capture exactly 0 intact depots. American engineers destroy every facility before German arrival or depots are located in towns Germans never reach. The planning assumption, captured fuel will sustain advance, proves completely wrong. Second factor: supply paralysis. German supply trucks experience 48 to 72-hour delays reaching front lines due to single-road bottlenecks, destroyed bridges requiring lengthy detours, and traffic jams extending 50 kilometers on narrow forest roads. And then the operational crisis escalates into strategic catastrophe. December 22 to 26, weather clears enabling Allied air superiority to manifest decisively. American P-47 Thunderbolts and British Typhoons attack German supply columns, destroying fuel trucks, ammunition carriers, and infantry transports. On December 23 alone, Allied aircraft fly 1,200 sorties, destroying an estimated 200 German vehicles, including fuel tankers. On December 24, fighter bombers attack Peiper's abandoned vehicles at La Gleize. December 25, 9th Air Force destroys German columns retreating from Bastogne area. The fuel shortage that began as logistics problem becomes catastrophe when Allied air power interdicts remaining supply attempts. German fuel situation December 26, total reserves in Bulge sector estimated 500,000 liters, enough for 1 day of limited operations. Offensive momentum, completely stopped. Strategic objective, unreached. Antwerp remains 100 kilometers beyond German maximum advance. The human cost of fuel exhaustion manifests in combat units rendered immobile and vulnerable. Tank crews abandon vehicles not from battle damage, but from empty tanks. German infantry units advance on foot unsupported by armor, sustaining 40% higher casualties than planned. Artillery units ration shells because supply trucks lack fuel to deliver ammunition. Wounded soldiers die awaiting medical evacuation vehicles without gasoline. Combat effectiveness ratings for German divisions in Bulge drop from 75% December 16 to 30% December 26, primarily from fuel and supply shortages rather than battle losses. American intelligence interrogates captured German tank crews asking why they abandoned functional vehicles. Response: no fuel. We destroyed fire control systems and gun mechanisms, then walked back toward Germany. The offensive designed to demonstrate German military remained capable of strategic operations instead reveals Wehrmacht reduced to a mobile remnant dependent on fuel supplies it cannot secure. December 24 to 26, Hitler refuses to acknowledge offensive failure, demanding continued attacks despite obvious fuel exhaustion. Radio messages from OKW, Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, German Armed Forces High Command, order, Advance to Meuse continues. Capture Antwerp remains priority objective.
No retreat ausgereist.
Reality at front contradicts orders completely. German commanders ignore directives, recognizing further advance impossible without fuel. Dietrich orders 6th Panzer Army to defensive positions December 25. Manteuffel withdraws 5th Panzer Army spearheads from Zellers December 27. Model, commanding Army Group B coordinating entire offensive, reports to Hitler December 28. Offensive objectives unattainable. Fuel shortage prevents further advance. Recommend withdrawal to defensible positions. Hitler rejects withdrawal authorization until January 8. 1945. 2 weeks after offensive momentum ended. The delay costs Germany additional 30,000 casualties. Defending indefensible salients. The fuel mathematics that doomed Bulge offensive become clear through captured German logistics documents. Wehrmacht allocated 5 million liters for initial offensive, enough for 150-kilometer advance in optimal conditions.
Actual consumption.
7 million liters to achieve 65-kilometer maximum penetration, nearly double planned consumption due to traffic delays, détours, and combat intensity. Fuel resupply reaching front lines. 1.5 million liters, less than 1/3 of consumption. German tanks consumed average 600 liters per 100 kilometers in Ardennes terrain, versus planned 400 liters per 100 kilometers. The 50% increase from difficult terrain, stop-and-go traffic, and combat operations meant fuel allocations based on optimistic planning ran out at half the expected distance. Even if every captured American depot had been seized intact, adding estimated 4 million liters, total available fuel of 10.5 million liters enables 250-kilometer advance maximum. Antwerp distance, 400 kilometers from German start lines. The offensive was mathematically impossible from beginning regardless of tactical success. The immediate strategic consequence of fuel exhaustion at Bulge extends beyond military defeat to German war economy collapse. Wehrmacht expends 5 million liters of precious fuel reserves achieving no strategic objectives. German fuel production December 1944. 30,000 tons. Fuel consumed in Bulge offensive, 10,000 tons, 1/3 of monthly production wasted. Remaining German fuel reserves post-Bulge, insufficient for sustained defensive operations. Eastern Front units receive 40% reduced fuel allocations January 1945, directly due to Bulge consumption. Western Front units operate at 30% fuel capacity. German mobile defense strategy, trading space for time through tactical withdrawals and counterattacks, becomes impossible when panzer divisions lack fuel for maneuver. British historian Max Hastings writes, Bulge offensive consumed Germany's last mobile reserves and fuel stockpiles, achieving nothing. Subsequent Allied offensives faced immobilized German defenders unable to conduct mobile defense. If German planning had accepted fuel limitations, military analysts calculate alternative scenarios. Scenario 1. Wehrmacht conducts limited offensive with achievable objectives. Attack toward Liege 40 kilometers distant rather than Antwerp 160 kilometers away. Allocate fuel for 60-kilometer advance with reserves. Capture limited territory forcing temporary Allied delay. Result: tactical success possible, strategic impact minimal. Scenario 2. Wehrmacht cancels offensive entirely, preserves fuel and armor for defensive operations on eastern and western fronts. Result: German armies better equipped for 1945 defensive campaigns, war potentially extended several months. Scenario 3. historical reality where Germany launches strategically ambitious offensive with inadequate fuel logistics. Result: catastrophic waste of remaining mobile reserves, fuel stockpiles exhausted, strategic position worsened. Post-war analysis concludes, Bulge offensive accelerated German defeat by destroying reserves that could have delayed Allied victory by months if used offensively. The fate of Kampfgruppe Peiper symbolizes larger offensive failure. Of original 5,800 troops, 800 survive retreat from La Gleize, 86% casualties. All 72 tanks abandoned, 0% recovery rate. American forces capture or destroy all German equipment. Peiper receives Knight's Cross with oak leaves for his exemplary leadership. Nazi propaganda transforms catastrophic failure into heroic sacrifice narrative. Post-war interrogation reveals Peiper's assessment. The offensive failed in first 24 hours when fuel resupply didn't arrive. Everything after that was fighting without hope of success. Sepp Dietrich, Sixth Panzer Army commander, testifies at Nuremberg trials, "We never had sufficient fuel to reach objectives Hitler demanded. The planning was fantasy." German casualties Bulge offensive December 16. 1944. January the 25th. 1945. 100,000 including 12,000 killed, 38,000 wounded, 30,000 missing. Personnel losses Germany cannot replace. Tank losses 600, half of Western Front armor strength eliminated. Remember December 18th. 1944. When Kampfgruppe Peiper's 72 tanks ran out of fuel 45 kilometers inside American lines after 48 hours of advance. Remember German fuel allocation for Bulge offensive totaled 5 million liters, enough for 150-kilometer advance in optimal conditions, but only 65 kilometers in reality due to terrain, traffic, and combat consumption. Remember Hitler's strategic plan required reaching Antwerp 160 kilometers distant, but German spearheads achieved maximum 65-kilometer penetration before fuel exhaustion. Remember German planning assumed captured American fuel depots would supply continued advance, but American engineers destroyed every depot before German capture. Remember weather cleared December 23rd, enabling Allied air power to destroy German supply columns carrying remaining fuel reserves. Remember the offensive consumed one-third of Germany's monthly fuel production, achieving zero strategic objectives. This is 72 hours in the Bulge, Hitler's last offensive that ran out of fuel before reaching any strategic objective, wasting Germany's final mobile reserves and accelerating ultimate defeat. The statistics quantify history's clearest demonstration that modern mechanized warfare absolutely depends on fuel logistics. Offensive duration: 10 days of major operations December 16th to 26th. Maximum penetration achieved after 72 hours. German forces committed: 200,000 troops, 500 tanks, 1,900 artillery pieces. Fuel allocated: 5 million liters. Fuel consumed: 7 million liters, achieving 65-kilometer advance. German planning underestimated consumption by 40%. American fuel depots captured intact: 0. German tank losses: 600, including 300 plus abandoned due to fuel exhaustion rather than battle damage. Personnel casualties: 100,000 German, 75,000 American. Strategic result: complete German failure. Not single German unit crossed Meuse River minimum objective. American historian Peter Caddick-Adams writes, Bulge offensive demonstrated mechanized armies cannot advance beyond fuel supply capability regardless of tactical success. Peiper reached furthest penetration, then sat immobile waiting for gasoline that never arrived. British historian Anthony Beevor states, German planning ignored logistics reality. Even perfect tactical execution couldn't overcome fuel mathematics that made Antwerp objective unattainable. Today, military logistics schools worldwide study Bulge offensive as definitive case study in fuel dependency. At U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, students analyze how German operational planning violated basic logistics principles, particularly assumption that capturing enemy supplies will solve shortages. At NATO Joint Warfare Center, Bulge demonstrates why modern militaries maintain fuel reserves exceeding operational plans by 50% minimum. Modern military doctrine explicitly incorporates Bulge lessons. Mechanized offensives cannot advance beyond fuel supply capability, captured enemy supplies never replace planned logistics, and fuel consumption in combat conditions exceeds peacetime calculations by 30 to 50%. The 1991 Gulf War coalition offensive maintained 60-day fuel reserves before attacking, direct application of Bulge lessons. Modern armies calculate operational reach, maximum distance forces can advance before logistics fail, as fundamental planning constraint. Hitler's Bulge offensive violated every principle of operational reach, leading to predictable failure when fuel exhausted after 72 hours. The lesson endures across 8 decades. Bold strategic visions fail absolutely when fuel tanks run empty. Kampfgruppe Peiper's 72 abandoned tanks at La Gleize symbolize eternal truth of mechanized warfare. Mobility without fuel equals immobility.